Hi, Embracing Only podcast family. This is Archita. We are introducing impact moments, actionable insights that highlight the best and powerful learning moments and wisdom from our past episodes of incredible guests. In this highlight reel, you'll hear leadership lessons from a combat veteran, taking action to be anti-racist, mastering workplace negotiations, leveraging your uniqueness for success. We'll take a topic and break it down in a short, snappy episode. So click on the link in the show notes to continue listening to these impact moments with our amazing guests. So there was a post you made that really resonated with me. You shared how just speak up is bad advice. And you said speaking up is not a Nike commercial, a just do it situation. And so for Olivia and myself, that was fascinating, right? Because for me, it shifted, but I navigated a huge part of my career being like, team, we're creating a safe space. Speak up. Speak up. And my team looked at me, okay, until one of the guys on my team was like, Achita, that's not enough. So unpack this for us and help us understand why just speak up is bad advice in workplaces.
Yeah. I'm taking that pause in that advice is dished out so often and also dished out with such good intention, right? What meaning leader hasn't said, tell me what you really think? Yes. And as leaders, we're like, but I'm safe. I'm not intimidating. I'm the most approachable person. I really care. And it's incredibly frustrating. And as a leader, why won't you trust me? Just speak up, I think, is horrible advice because it ignores all of the history, all of the silence that we've learned, all the times that we've had our hands slapped, that we've lost our jobs, that we've had to deal with retaliation, that we've had to deal with people's defensiveness when we did speak up, right? The times that we took the risk to speak up and it did not go well are forever seared in our brains and often in our bodies. And to say, just do it, as if it's just that easy, fails to recognize that history. It also fails to recognize a lot of the ways that we as well-meaning leaders continue to silence people. Even as we say, I'm here to support you, my door is always open. And yet when you raise something, maybe because I'm tired, maybe because I'm busy, maybe because the deadline is looming, I snap at you. Or I change the subject and say, no, here's the real issue at play. To which those of us who have just taken the risk to speak up to do the thing that you told us to do are, see, it's proof that it's not actually safe for me to say what I really think. And let me be clear, I am pro speaking up. Right? We wouldn't be on Embracing Only. We would not be here. We would not be successful in corporations if we didn't speak up. I want us to acknowledge the complexity of the situation because too often just speak up means you, woman, often woman of color, you with a subordinate identity, you are the problem. So if you would just speak up, we'd have no issue here. But because you're not speaking up, we have a problem. Versus there's a systemic challenge that we have, which is we elevate specific voices. We have a predefined sense of what leadership or expertise looks and sounds like. And we fail to recognize that challenge. And so we perpetuate silence even as we talk about and tell people just speak up.
It's such an interesting thought, Elaine. I go back and forth with this, and all of your points are so valid, right? Even when you think just about how the human brain works, and Archita's probably making a face at me because I'm super fascinated with anything to do with the human brain. But it's that whenever our brain signals a threat, whether it's you're being chased by a lion through the jungle or you have anxiety because your boss is breathing down your neck about something at work, it triggers the same response in your brain. And so when we feel unsafe, the brain will lock down, right? It'll clamp up. It'll force us into that silence based on experiences we've had in our past. But I think Archita and I often encourage women to use their voices, because if we settle into the thought, okay, this bad thing happened to me in the past when I did this, therefore it is going to repeat itself in the future. If we stay rooted in that thought, nothing changes, though. So, how do you, especially when you're coaching women, balance this thought of, okay, say a boss or someone well intended trying to get you to come out of your shell isn't necessarily enough. But then you, as an individual, if you want something to change, have to find a way around that. So, how do you balance the two?
So we'll go macro and then we'll go micro. So macro thinking, unlearning silence is not only about me unlearning my silence and speaking up, even though I need to do that. It is also about leaders and the people around us unlearning the ways that they are silencing us and unlearning the ways that the systems and the policies and the practices we have advantage some people and silence other people. So those are our three levers: unsilence myself, unsilence the way I silence people around us, and then cultural and systems. Very micro, completely agree with you. When we talk about employee silence, everyone actually has a role to play in this culture of silence, this idea of we don't talk about things here. And silence breeds silence, right? Olivia, every time you don't speak up, then people around you are like, oh, I guess Olivia knows the rules around here, so we're not going to do it either. And then we get ourselves in this hole. Any of us actually have the power to disrupt that. There's a whole cost benefit analysis as to whether it is worth it for you in any given instance, which is chapter 3 of my book, because not all of us are equally situated. Some of us, if you lose that paycheck, you cannot pay rent. You have to put food on the table. And I'm also challenging people regularly. If you have 6 months of savings, if you do not worry about food insecurity, stop worrying so much, because there are people who actually the cost is way higher and way greater. So 2 thoughts on the micro. One is we often think that speaking up it emotionally feels combative, right? Your boss says something that you don't agree with and you're like, oh, I got to fight back. Versus if you were to just say, I see it differently, right? As that sort of transition phrase. Or from where I sit in California versus in New York versus in Hong Kong versus in Sao Paulo, things look different. Or as an engineer, if you put on your hat and own the domain that you have to say, we'll sit in different places and things look different, speaking up doesn't have to be combative. And the other way to think about using your voice is also corporate America, and Archita, you can bring in our global perspective more here. A lot of times organizations prioritize people who can speak up in real time in live meetings or virtual meetings versus the person who follows up in email or puts it in Slack. And so when I'm coaching people on how to use your voice, it's really thinking, actually, what makes it easier for you to express your thoughts? If it is easier for you to do it in typing, fantastic. Design the communication flow, set the expectation with your manager to use the medium that is easier for you. And so often we just default in terms of communication patterns rather than designing them. But what manager wouldn't want to incorporate different communication flows if you're actually going to get the best ideas, if you're actually going to finally get people to share what they think? It's such a simple shift, but one that it's almost like you're paying me to tell you this, because that it's not rocket science. There are different ways we communicate. There are different ways we process information. How can we create mediums and forums and communication flows that actually bring forth those ideas?
Gosh, Elaine, I felt lazy leadership when we don't exercise that. Zoom, I think, brought this to the forefront. Because when we were in person a lot, you'd walk out into the corridor, you may make the effort as a leader to be like, hey, you didn't speak up. Is there anything you wanted to share? Can we chat about it? But when you're in this Zoom environment, primarily, if something has not been communicated there, you've almost lost your ticket to share. And literally, I would call this out. Like, if you are one of those leaders doing it, it is lazy leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Design communication by intent. I'm just like phrasing what you shared. versus just going with the flow of this is what it looks like. And you shared something once where you called it the Babble Hypothesis of Leadership. So could you help unpack that for our listeners? What is the Babble Hypothesis of Leadership?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for this because this is different sociologists and psychologists and researchers who have termed it the Babble psychologist leadership. A couple of different research studies, but essentially in any 6-person meeting, 2 people primarily do 80% of the talking. And most people associate frequency or quantity of words that come out of your mouth with potential with leadership and potential to be leaders, which is just ridiculous. But so often how our brains are coded and the model of leadership. And so it's not even whether what you say has value, but literally frequency of speech. Right? If people are quiet, someone speaks up or moves the conversation forward, they are demonstrating leadership. And so the Babble theory of leadership is really people are babbling and maybe they can be talking out of their behinds. But as long as you keep having words, people code that as leadership. And so I and many other people are on a mission to disrupt that association, that assumption, that frequency of speech, regardless of quality, actually should be interpreted as leadership.
Elaine, as I gotta tell you, I love this one because you're describing corporate America.
I know.
Right? I cannot tell you, as a recovering introvert myself, I cannot tell you how many meetings I've sat in and watched some Yahoo go on, and I want to bash my head against the screen because they're going on and literally saying nothing. Right? Or just repeating the information that we just received. And you're like, oh my God, please stop. Please stop talking. Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. As an introvert, you tend to feel like the extroverts run the world because that's where all the chatter is coming from. And maybe you need some time to mull. You need some time to think before you can have a really thoughtful question. And it's back to your previous point. I think it's really, if you are not designing your communication for your team in a way that benefits your team, you're really not being an inclusive leader, right? Completely. You're expecting the team to adapt to you, vice the other way around.
That's exactly, you literally just hit the nail on the head, which is when we don't actively design, we default to the preferences or the patterns, which could just be habits. This is what happens in corporate America. And so now I'm in corporate America. So now I'm going to do the thing, which is we need to have live meetings where we're giving status updates, which is a total waste of time because that could have been an email, could have been a memo, right? But that's that power dynamic as well. Oh, we are defaulting to the CEO's preference. We are defaulting to the team leader's preference, unless we actively think about it. And it's not a hard switch to make. It is literally a conversation that, as a leader, to stop being a lazy leader, as Archita said, what serves my team? What serves the people in the communication patterns and the processing types that I have on my team if we are committed to bringing forth not just the loudest ideas, not just the most verbose ideas, but really the highest quality ideas.